Hello and good afternoon. Ooh, I normally have like a little glass to tinkle, but I don't think I need that today. Yes, hello and good afternoon, everyone. I will shortly have the pleasure of inviting two marketing and business leaders onto our stage for our first panel of the afternoon. Securing your first NED role, which I know a number of you are very excited to listen to. But before I do that, I'd first like to welcome you all to Abbey Road Studios, this iconic venue, which I can say for Hot Topics, we're thrilled to come back to once again this year, and we're thrilled to be coming back to in 2024. It's the perfect place to host the studio and, of course, you all. I've been reliably informed that this is the 10th iteration of the studio, which is both equal parts terrifying and exhilarating. There are a number of you, a number of faces in the room actually, whom I know have been with us throughout the entire journey. So first of all, thank you. If you cast your mind back to 2019, we started at the Ministry of Sound's Members Club. And it was a fantastic event, but a few months later, we all had to adapt to the events of the following year, which kick-started our love-hate relationship with virtual platforms, but it also meant that we were able to bring together, in the next virtual-only events, a truly global list of marketing leaders together on everything we were getting up to, not just the studio, but also our smaller meetups and everything else, which is absolutely fantastic, and it's brilliant to be here today to celebrate that. There are also a number of you in the room whom I don't know, who I haven't yet had the pleasure to meet. So for your benefit, I'd just like to say that the reason why some of the people sitting next to you often come to our events is for three reasons. The first is that the studio and everything we do provides you with a platform, quite literally, to share your thought leadership with your peers. What you do, what you don't do, what you invest in, what you don't invest in. It really is a brilliant time and opportunity to share that with your peers. And of course, the reverse of that is the second reason, is to learn from your peers too. There are scant opportunities now to be in the same room with individuals who are exactly at your level. This is a marketing leaders community, and it's a global one too. I should add that individuals have flown from the US, Egypt, UAE, and more to be here with us today. To those of you joining through our virtual feed, thank you for joining us too. You are from 35 different countries, I hear, and there are a number of you across Britain who sadly can't be with us because of certain TS. I won't even bother saying that name. The third reason is to also build up your own community within the Hot Topics community as well. So that's the third reason as well. And it's a brilliant opportunity in these times also to learn from everyone as well. Without further ado, please let me welcome Chris and Susie onto the stage, joining me for securing your first NED role. Now, I didn't get the opportunity to fully introduce yourself just now, so I'll let you do the talking in a second. But Susie is an NED for JD Sports. Chris is the same with Aviva. Both have storied marketing careers in their own rights, Susie being the former CMO of BT and Chris of HSBC. Now, the reason why, or there is a reason I should say, why this particular panel is opening our afternoon is because it's the most requested discussion. And we're not here to dissuade people, are we? We're actually here to we're actually here to allow the two of you to share your experiences, thank you, with the marketing leaders and give them the chance to see what's what. So my first question to you both is, they want to be an NED. What's the unvarnished truth?
Gosh. My best bits of unvarnished truth, because the whole unvarnished truth would take a lot longer, have to do with, I think, the perception versus the reality in terms of time. So they will tell you 24 days. I absolutely promise you, if they say that, it's 50. They will tell you you have more control over your time. I promise that that is true, except for when you don't. And when you don't will be when there's a crisis on the business, when there's COVID, when there's an emergency board meeting. And when those things happen, you've got to be available 24/7, 365, drives a coach and horses through your life. And they will tell you that it's glamorous and that you have hot and cold running minions. That's the olden days of being a NED. So I think unvarnished requires negatives, and there are some negatives. Would you like some positives to go with?
We will get to the positives.
Okay. So they're the negative bits. And I've got to mention, or I wouldn't forgive myself, the increasing world of regulation and responsibility and accountability, which is incredibly sobering. So you are very aware that you are going to meetings and you are personally accountable for everything you do, and you know that intellectually. But the regime is changing, and that is more true than it's ever been. There are a few.
Yeah, we will get to that too. It's a good point. Chris, the unvarnished truth from your perspective.
The unvarnished truth needs a disclaimer at the beginning, which is, why are you looking at a NED? What is it for? Is it to fill that tiny little nugget of time between your Pilates class and your next round of golf? Because if it is, don't. That is not the place to go. If, however, you get to where I got to at the age of blah, 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 and someone says, what do you want to do next? And you say, nothing. And they say, well, you've done your current job for 7 years, so kind of let's figure out a retirement package. That was a scary word. And you find yourself sitting there looking at things and thinking, I can't have nothing to do. I'll jump at the first thing I see. I know that charity over there that says it'll only take a day a month and takes 6 days a week is not the sort of stuff to do. So understand why you're doing it. And then you can cope with the negatives, as Sue said. If you're a bit restless, and I kind of think we've probably got similar personality types, you're going to want to say to yourself, I don't want to be, I'm speaking for Sue, I don't want to be sitting around doing nothing. I want to be part of something that still matters. But I also want to have a little bit more time, only a little bit, to be able to do some other things. And I think that's part of what it is. And if some of those other things involve putting something back, then that will be positive. But those things are also incredibly difficult. I've got 2 NEDs. My other one is the Royal Marsden Hospital, which is a cancer hospital. And when your MI pack comes through with number of deaths recorded in the right place where the person wished to die, and that's a KPI we have at the Marsden, you start dealing with stuff that's a bit more important than whether or not the agency have delivered a really good digital campaign. And so sometimes you'll get yourself into stuff that really matters. When you're looking at, and I'll make it up, but when you're looking at a big retail organisation like Susie has, and they're going to close 10 stores, and they're going to get rid of this many jobs, and they're going to have people in local communities up in arms about all sorts of things, you will skirt across stuff that really matters. And that's when it feels good. If it's your mate's startup, we'll give it a go and see how it goes, and if they can give you some equity for the purposes of turning up and helping them sort out a few things, then that's great. But I think you've got to understand, firstly, why you're doing it, and that will then colour how you receive the kind of unvarnished bits that say, that's why it sticks in my craw a bit, that's why I don't like it very much, or that's why it's the best thing I've ever done.
Yeah, there are NED roles and then there are NED roles. And you touched upon your journey and story there, Chris, but Susie, from your perspective, what was your journey to becoming a NED, just so you can add colour for the audience?
So for me, I'd been at BT for 10 years. I'd done a job, I was incredibly lucky, the scale of it, the impact of it, the kinds of things I got to do. I couldn't imagine my next role. So I did what I would recommend everybody does, which is I looked around for boards I could sit on and things I could influence. And I got involved with government a bit. I sat on boards within my own organisation, so I kind of, stretched my skill set beyond marketing a little bit. And then I also got myself a trusteeship. So I went and joined the board of Help Musicians, which is a great charity. And that just gave me the sense that this was what I wanted to do. And then I won't make a difference between what really happened. The first call I got from a headhunter about a board role was the AA was the role I did, was where I started. And I was very lucky that it was a big company. It was a big salary for a NED job. And it was a great big national institution brand. So it felt like important work, which was important to me. So that was how I started doing it.
So get a good headhunter.
Yeah, well, that's almost the opposite of what I think in general, actually. But in that case, that was true. And I did charity stuff. And I learned so much working with government, working with the royal family, doing a bunch of random charity things. So I did a lot of give back, and then I got very commercial. You might do it in a different order. But that was the way I did it.
Is that a common route to go down the charity step first? I've heard that a couple of times now. And if so, what are the sort of, well, not guardrails, but hurdles to cross over in order to make sure you're the good fit for it? Because it doesn't typically pay well, and as you've intimated, Chris, it can be a little challenging from a pivoting perspective.
I think it's really about saying, some of those third sector kind of roles and public service, if you like, and charity is you need probably a kind of some kind of, stone in your shoe as to why you're doing it. I think, you've got to have a figure out why. And then it's also about what you offer. And actually the one I think I would say, which is slightly more difficult, and it may feel a little unpalatable to say so, but if they want your Rolodex so that you can introduce them to a bunch of people who might give them money, it's okay up to a point, that kind of thing. But if that's all they really want, then just do it. Just give them the Rolodex or make a few phone calls or send them some stuff. Don't take on the whole idea of being a trustee and everything else. The thing I think with marketing people, and I'm sure I'm going to walk away with fewer friends this afternoon, but never mind, I've got enough Christmas cards. One of the things that I think is really important is that you understand what your superpowers are, because you'll all have them. And they might be in things that you don't think are very important parts of your job. But essentially they are the things they value. And so that might be, how you understand what you understand about digital, just as a general subject area. At the Royal Marsden, I was called tallest dwarf on digital, because essentially out of my other NEDs, who were all really lovely people, a couple of good clinicians and, 2 other business people, I knew more about digital than anyone. So when a non-exec director had to be put in to chair the committee that was the steering group for the whole transformation program of putting in a whole new digital health record across, this monster hospital, I got the job because I was the tallest dwarf. And it is that kind of stuff. How do you start to understand what you offer? And how do you start to understand? Because I think one of the most important things that's happened to me over this last year is I chair the conduct committee of the Aviva general insurance business, okay? And that's all about customers. You understand customers, I hope, better than anybody else in your organisation. Because if you don't, you're just, you're the colouring in department, and you don't want to be the colouring in department. So I think what you've got to do is understand what your superpowers are that you bring. Things like customer. So we had a whole thing called consumer duty that was a massive FCA, if anyone's got any financial services kind of experiences. It's been a massive piece of work that the FCA have put in place across the whole of the financial services industry, from insurance companies to banks to everybody. I chair that as well, because I'm the customer person in my board. And it's those sorts of things, being able to manage a pitch for your next piece of above-the-line marketing is really not something that they're going to want you to do as a NED. But if you understand customers, you understand data, you understand digital, you've now got stuff that's worth offering up. And you'll have it in sectors or you'll have it in places, which is also good. But start to understand those are the sorts of things they value.
Is that true of your experience, Susie, your superpower, bringing that onto JD Sports and your other positions?
Yeah, so I'm currently on, I was just thinking about how many, 6 boards, going from FTSE 50 all the way down to Hot Topics, in fact.
Caveat.
The best, if the smallest.
Thank you.
And absolutely customer is the superpower. And I think one of the things to be ready for as a marketing person joining a board is days spent talking about finances, corporate finance, things that really as a marketing person, you're not an accountant, right? Probably 10 to 1 versus days talking about marketing. You've got to be ready for that, because that can be quite frustrating to start off with. But if you're on a board that's on the journey to being customer-centric, then you are that customer lead in that room. So for a lot of my businesses, they're on a transformation journey, they're trying to be more customer-centered. Naturally, I've got to tolerate the 10-to-1 ratio. I've had to massively up my finance game, and I've had some amazing teachers, which is one of the great things about being a NED. But the one other thing I would say about superpowers is, if you're going to sit on a FTSE board, you're going to have to decide that you'll chair something. You've got to chair a committee at some point. And I ended up being a remuneration committee chair. It is not a superpower. I did not have it when I joined. But as a marketing person, you're not going to chair audit, you're not going to chair risk. You've got to chair something. So for me, it was remuneration. And probably for many of you, if you go this route, that's what will be what you do. Could also be ESG now that you end up chairing. And remuneration is agony. It is the least popular person on the board of every company. It is the hardest from a conflict point of view, but it's also brilliant because we all know that what gets rewarded gets done, and you get to talk strategy and you get to meet shareholders. So along the way, you acquire a new superpower because you have to start chairing a committee and become known for that.
My next question is, where should marketing leaders start? But actually, I think it might be more interesting to think about something you both touched upon, which is trying to find an organisation that's on that customer journey or on that way. How does one, when one is looking for a new position, you're talking to headhunters, you're scouring your contacts, you're chatting with people like yourselves, what should one look out for in terms of green flags that think, actually, yes, they will need a marketing NED or marketing leader becoming an NED because they're on that customer journey? What are we looking out for here?
I don't think there's necessarily, job ads out there that put these things in place. I think you have to start to look at a company and figure out how to get through the door. I mean, I've done mine through headhunters, through sort of mates who have said, come and have a look at this. And, so therefore network is very, very important, and it goes beyond the basics of them needing a NED. What you can end up doing is coming in and advising them on a couple of very simple things. They might have, if it's a kind of, third sector company, it might need somebody to come in and just take a look at, its websites and its kind of digital sort of, well, I'll come and help you with that. And that then gives you some people to talk to. You might get paid if it's proper, small scale consultancy. What I would say is you have to kiss a lot of frogs, basically, in my experience, because actually you got to fly a ton of missions. And if you were ever in the boat, and I was chatting to someone before we came, we were having a bit of curry with him just now. See him over there, Simon from IBM. But basically, when you find yourself all of a sudden not in your full-time role, I had a temptation to chew at anything that came along. And actually what you've got to do is understand what fits for you and what doesn't. And that kind of, nice marketing person's insecurity that makes you want to be able to please everybody and be a nice good puppy dog and do all the things that we've always all done, and see a few people smiling out there, so you all recognise that personality type, is actually one of those sorts of things where you've got to be really careful. Everything you get offered is not worth going after, and figure out how. If we get bored in a minute, I'll tell you how I managed to figure it out, but I'll let Susan answer the question first.
What was the question again, please?
Looking at if you're positioned to that board.
So how do you know that they want? I completely agree with you. I don't think. Well, they might come looking for a marketing NED. So generally, they've come to me looking for a female marketing led. Ladies, everything you've heard is true in that regard. Gentlemen, sorry. They would come looking for a female marketing NED. But then when you meet them, you have to get under the skin of what they think that means. And invariably, what they think it means and what you would like it to mean are not the same. And then you finding a company that's on that journey. So one of mine is a brilliant business called Telecom Plus. Utility Warehouse is their sort of front-facing name. And they actually are a network marketing business that doesn't do what we'd recognise as mainstream consumer marketing, but they want to be more customer-focused and they want to grow. So I think one of the things for all of us is to identify a business that really wants to grow and that has a chairman and a CEO who are interested in the skills that we all bring to helping that growth. And I think growth and customer are the two keys through the door when you talk to these people. Chris is so right. I think you've got to check your ego enormously if you decide to go from being a CMO with all the power and all the money and all the flexibility that we enjoy to being a NED. And when you start interviewing, it's brutal. Headhunters are brutal. And although I got my first job really quickly, I must have gone for 20 interviews with absolutely no luck whatsoever, and some utterly brutal feedback at that early stage. And it's been a 10-year journey for me. And I think until very recently, I felt I was in the middle of the wobbly rope bridge trying to cross from one side to the other. So I think if you want to do the whole transition and not just add a NED to what you do anyway, just be aware it's a career transition and make sure that you're careful that you're going places where you're valued.
For a bit of levity, what does a great day look like as a NED?
Oh, I'll go. So I had a brilliant NED day on Friday with one of my boards who shall remain nameless. And we do this every sort of 18 months or so. We were out on the river. We went to the Waterside Inn at Bray. We talked about strategy. We drank the most expensive wine I think I've had in my life. Everyone got on really well. We talked about the future of the company. The guy that founded the company is the chairman, and he was ecstatic with everything. That was just a great day, doing all the things you think you're going to do and having a nice time while doing it. That was an excellent NED day.
Perfect. So I'm sold, by the way.
And it was on Friday, so it's very real for me.
Any wine escapades, vineyard tours, maybe?
No, I'm going to tell you an entirely different story, as I found incredibly satisfying. Consumer Duty, the program that's put in place by the FCA, I get asked to be the champion for the Aviva insurance business on this thing. And all of a sudden, it's that kind of 3 months into it and we're nowhere. There's a panic. They rejig the entire team. They put a whole bunch of different people together to deliver this thing. We're now sort of T-minus 3 months when it's a 9-month kind of window to get this thing done. Next 6 months is going to be hellish. Someone from the main board at the top of the house at the holding company decides that they now think we're doing it wrong. So if you ask Mrs. Clark what I'm like, she said, "You're at home to Mr. Conflict." I put on my most measured, aggressive hat that I've had in years, and I walked in with I wrote a 2-page email about why what they were currently asking us to do was so wrong for all of these reasons. And the relief on the team's face when I put this into the machinery and all hell broke loose. I had my chief exec from the insurance business ringing the chairman of the insurance business going, "Chris has stepped over the line. He's no longer independent. He's now behaving like an executive." And I took great pleasure in walking into his office and going, "I understand you've got a bit of a problem with me stepping over the line. Do you want to talk to me about it?" "Oh, no, we're fine. And it's that kind of sense of making sure for me that an incredibly incompetent, stupid way of doing things was about to be imposed on a bunch of people who were brilliant people, who were basically pooping themselves because all of a sudden group were telling them that what they'd been doing for the last month and a half, having had 3 months where nothing had happened, month and a half of what is my favourite person in the whole organisation running this bloody programme, was a mess. And stepping in and being clear-eyed and using data and information like we all do, we hope we do, and being very sensible about the governance that's required, the accountabilities that are required to deliver this program in a timely fashion. The look on the face of the people who I was supporting during that was worth a great day in the NED shop. And it's, you know, you'll have plenty of lousy days while you have to do IFRS 17, which is a new international financial reporting standard with a new kind of way of looking at how insurance companies account for their capital. The one thing I would say on that is if you don't understand and you're a NED, ask. No one minds if you don't know.
Chris, I'm so glad you said that because we actually can now segue to audience Q&A. So, what a brilliant segue. As I said in the opening speech, this is an opportunity for you all not just to be on a platform and share your thought leadership, but learn from each other as well. So We've got roaming mics across. If anyone has any questions, please don't be nervous or hesitant. We've got 5-10 minutes baked into the panel for this. I've got further questions to ask if not, but does anyone have any questions now for Chris and Susie? Brilliant. Preeti, just pause 1 second.
It's a question for you, Chris. You talked about this example that you just gave right now, and it's a situation that I think a lot of us face when we are in board meetings or senior exec meetings as well. How do you get that confidence to say, well, this is not the right path to take when you're representing a team who feel the same way? You mentioned the comment that you were overstepping the mark and behaving as an executive as opposed to a NED. But what gave you the confidence to do that? And what did you think about, the repercussions if it didn't go your way?
You have to have the kind of moments in your kind of track record. It's almost like that sort of sports thing where you visualize kind of what success looks like at this moment. And what you shouldn't be doing is being aggressive either for the sake of it or, understand the territory and revisit I must have revisited this email 6 times before I pressed the send button. I did not write it in a fit of pique. I wrote it with a very clear-eyed point of view about the kind of areas where it would fail and the kind of issues it caused. I took a delight in putting 1 paragraph at the end, which was really about a whole bunch of terminology that they'd used that essentially showed me that this person had used a consultant to write this, and therefore they had no idea what this business was really all about. But there was that bit. But I think it's about making sure you feel safe on your turf and using particularly data and information and hard facts. I used to have I had a career limiting moment at HSBC, which I hung on for the rest of my career, which was always, I remember once, this is a little tiny story, we had these kind of aggressive sort of, banker types at HSBC, and we just put up a new set of program of campaigns at the airport. And I remember this Scottish guy who was a very senior bloke at our organisation, and he was walking down the corridor. He said, Chris, I need to have a little bit of a word. My wife and I were walking through the jet bridges last week, and we didn't like what we saw. Thought a few of them were a bit risky. It's not really us. And I said to him, I tell you what, why don't you tell me what you know? I'm only slightly interested in what you think. Why don't you tell me what you know? What do you know about how our customers consume this stuff? What do you know about how this changes the way that people consider us as a brand in the future? Let's have a little chat about that. And by the way, if you want to let me loose with some of the money to lend to some people, I'll do that as well. And so go back. Always understand, your data, your information. It's not about what people think. It's about what you know. What I knew from the firm evaluation letter that had been written by the FCA in the previous week about how we were supposed to be doing this stuff that these people hadn't even read. And it's like, what I would say, and I'm sure Susie will be nice and kind and agree with me again, never busk it as a NED. You can't. You cannot just go, I've got an opinion. I've got a kind of, I'm sure I'm vaguely right. I heard it in a pub the other night when someone was wanging on about some service that they were, no. You've got to be, it's a very serious business. I think Susie underlined that very well earlier when she said, these are companies where, I've been measured up for my orange boiler suit in no uncertain terms at Aviva, because essentially if you get it wrong, it's it's prosecution stuff. You don't get away with just saying, oh, well, that didn't go so well, did it?
Thanks, Preeti. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, one at the back.
Hi there. Question for Susie. I think you said you were currently doing about 6. I've spoken to various people who do NED roles, and some say, 2's the max for me, or 4, and I was surprised when you said 6, because I think that's closer to the top of the range. What makes 6 the right place for you and for stopping there?
Okay, great question. So I think once you become a NED, your portfolio's got to be alive all the time. So there's normally 2 on the way in, 2 on the way out, and 2 kind of in the middle, right? But the way I do this is I work with startups because I love it, And that is something I almost see as a hobby. So 3 of those 6 are startups. And I've got small businesses, I've got some equity in them, I coach the CEO, I help them do their brand and marketing. The 3 are the FTSE, one FTSE 100, one FTSE 250 and another one. So I think absolutely 3 or 4 big businesses is more than enough for anybody. When you're doing startups and you're working with your friends, it's super flexible, and I just do it because I love it. So, but yeah, more than 3 or 4 big companies would be, I think, too much for most people.
Thanks, Mark. Got time for one more question if anyone... Oh, brilliant.
You mentioned, Susie, that you started by sitting on boards within your own company. And I'm curious about the range of models. Can you sit on a board within a big job, or do you have to make that cut and be pure NED? Is there a hybrid model that could be a starter?
So at BT, for example, we had a diversity and inclusion board. So by sitting on that, I was just making it clear that I could do things outside marketing. So I wasn't really, although a little bit you do, of course you do, but I wasn't really focusing on marketing. I was now leading for that in the company. So that was the first thing. And then the other thing I did was I sat on boards outside the company where, for example, the chairman was asked to do something for government, and I kind of sneaked in and said, why don't I do that? You're very busy. And so I got to do that. So a little bit of doing that can be transformational for you, you know, learning and demonstrating that you can do something different. And I would always start there as far as you can. Do things within your own business that demonstrate diversity.
Fantastic. Thanks both Chris and Susie. That's all we have time for, and thank you for the questions too. We try and inbuild 15 minutes of decompression, get a coffee, relax, chat to your fellow leaders. Also, I'm sure Chris and Susie would be more than happy to chat with you one-on-one throughout the afternoon. Again, it's one of the reasons why we're all here to meet and network. But please join me in thanking our panellists this afternoon.
Bravo. Thank you. Bravo.